Greetings to each and every one of you. Intending that you are having a fantastic Capricorn season. It is a time of much change, of course. We are entering this period with Mars retrograde, but it's going to station direct pretty soon on the 12th of January. And so Mercury is also going to be within this retrograde period until we enter February. And so we could be dealing with a lot of shifts, alterations with regards to our communications. Mars retrograde in Gemini, Mercury sign, and the lunar cycle that we enter this period in being Capricorns. So we're going to look at all of the different planets and the major transits of 2023 in this video and see how we go from the beginning of the year with Pluto here in Capricorn, Saturn here in Aquarius, and all of the shifts that are going to take place with the ingress of Saturn into Pisces, where it hasn't been for 28 years, and Pluto dipping its toe into Aquarius for the first time in 242 years, as well as coming back into Capricorn for the vast majority of 2023. Not only that, but the nodes of the moon, which have been in signs ruled by Venus and Mars, are going to be changing from Scorpio, where Ketu the south node is, and Taurus, where Rahu the north node is, to Libra, where Ketu the south node shall be, as well as Aries, where Rahu the north node shall be. Well, that's not before we have eclipses in the spring in the signs they're in at the moment, though. Venus is going to go retrograde in Leo come the summertime. So we're going to be refathoming a lot, especially with Venus ruling the nodes. Mars retrograde at this moment, also ruling where the nodes, the stage transit at this current time. So it's a very powerful time for us with regards to our value, our identity, and how we assert these things. It's always those moments, isn't it? But particularly through these times, our interpersonal relationships and how we can put our divisions aside and connect with the heart, open up the potentials of seeing that we have got solutions beyond the division. We can expand our consciousness using the tool of astrology. And so I'm going to go through all of these major transits, Jupiter through Aries, all the way into Taurus. Just look at the highlights of these things and the eclipses we've got going on, as mentioned. But what we're going to start this video with is a look at the elections for the year, because there's windows of time where we have an opportunity to see that the planet which rules a sign is top of the sky or placed nicely near the MC. And these are very nice opportunities for us to capitalize on our experiences. And so, without further ado, I shall be sharing with you this. I must let you know, if you would like me to choose elections for your chart, then I'm able to do it for weddings, bar mitzvahs, business, building. Maybe you've got a building a school. This is the time of recognizing we might be building a gym. It doesn't matter what you're building. There's a time and a place for these things to be elected with regards to the transits and how they come into our charts and what we would like to imprint as the nativity for our project as well. So, without further ado, thank you for your presence. Allow me to share my screen. And we start out the year with Venus actually in Capricorn, and we have a very fine election chart for Venus as we start out the year. So let me get this ready for you and we shall have a look at it. It's actually Venus at the very last degrees of Capricorn, and what we have is this opportunity to see Taurus ascendant, not just Taurus ascendant people, but the time that Taurus is the ascendant in the day. At the beginning of the year, we'll have Venus at the top of the sky. And this is quite, firstly, transcendent, because we start the year out with a Venus-Pluto conjunction. And so let me show you this on the screen. And This is obviously going to be very nice with regards to business or the value of our voice, speaking our truth, and all these types of things. Let me share my screen with you. If you want a personal consultation, follow the links below. And intending that you've had a fantastic holidays and we're moving into 2023 prosperously, right? My name's Philip Daniel Miles. I'm grateful for your presence. And so here we go. This is Venus ruling the chart because it's a Taurus midheaven, the 1st of January. This is going to be at slightly different times of day for everybody, but it's going to be in the afternoon times because that's when we're going to have the Taurus ascendant coming up over the eastern horizon. We also got a Venus ruled moon this day, conjunct Uranus. And Venus is next to Pluto, having just made it through Pluto. And it's a 28-degree midheaven this day. And so we can find that actually this stays the course for a few weeks and it gets very interesting. So it takes us right up until the 18th of January. Let me walk us through it, and we keep an eye on the ascendant because the ascendant degree is going to be going up. Venus actually changes sign on the 3rd of January into Aquarius, which is really cool. So the midheaven swaps over at this time of day to following Venus, and we actually have Uranus in Taurus, Venus's sign, and Venus in Aquarius, Uranus' sign. So there's a mutual reception. They don't aspect each other yet, but we will find that the Venus and midheaven keep patrolling and crawling. We even have the day on January the 6th, 7th, and 8th, where we will have Uranus around the ascendant as Venus is with the midheaven. So there's the mutual reception as well as that lovely signature playing out there. It's electrifying, it's real shocking. Obviously, the house will change, so you want to pay attention to that. Venus falls from the 10th to the 9th, so it's more about traveling, it's more about business, but we really want to pay attention to where that is in your local zone. But these are great dates for us. And we will even have, once we get to this point in January the 14th, Venus square Uranus, which is in a conjunction with the North Node. So Venus actually does square the nodes here as well on the 10th of January, squares the South Node Ketu in Scorpio at 9 degrees and squares the North Node Rahu. So it's an evolutionary step for our value. Very powerful is this. And this is just after the back of the Cancerian full moon. Of course, we're talking early days into the new year. Mars stations direct this day, and we still have Venus traveling with the midheaven. And so this only plays out until the 18th of January. But these are great prospects for us because the whole year, Venus is only going to be doing this for 2 phases. And so there's only a certain amount of days which you're going to get this for. And so this is why I'm sharing this with you. It's incredibly valuable electional astrology. So the 28th degree of Taurus is where I stopped this. And we'll see that Venus, let's say on the 18th as well. We can keep going to the 18th. And so if I pull this back by a few minutes, we'll get 28 degree Taurus here. And Venus is still within 3 or 4 degrees of the midheaven. But yeah, Venus is also coming along to Saturn at this point. I think it can be a little bit of a squeeze for a few days here. But once Venus moves beyond Saturn and then into Pisces, also we can notice the signature of the Sun-Pluto day, which is where we started our journey on the new year with Venus. And so very nice. We move into that Aquarius lunar cycle. Also on this day, Mercury stations direct, sextile the South Node, quincunx to Mars retrograde, station direct, actually, isn't it? It's been a week of direct. So Mercury stations direct on the 18th as we move out of the dark lunar phase of the Capricornian lunar cycle and into an Aquarius lunar cycle. This is a very beautiful station. Mercury is going to be spending all of its retrogrades in the Earth signs. All of Capricorn, the next one will be in all of Taurus, and then in all of Virgo. And that's how it goes. Over the course of about 4 years, just under, Mercury does retrograde in every sign, all of the 12 signs, and it tends to do it by element. Last year, it was retrograde in air to earth. So it would go retrograde at the end of an air sign and back into the beginning of an earth sign. And so now it's doing those other degrees it didn't really necessarily reach so much this year in the earth signs. And so Mercury stations direct, 8 degrees of Capricorn here. Very intriguing. We'll move forward back to where it stations retrograde on the 27th of December, 28th of December, 24 degrees of Capricorn, and goes into Aquarius about the 11th, 12th of February. And so it's interesting that that happens then. But let's talk about Mercury. Now we move it forward a few weeks. And around February the 20th, after Mercury's come out of its shadow here, lovely that it sextiles the South Node, quincunx Mars. It's a real powerful integration for how we communicate with one another, bringing us much more closer to ourselves and each other in our personal relationships and business partnerships and all things that we're able to really help this Mars retrograde along with. Obviously, Mars retrograde has been a 7-month saga that started back in August and will go on until March. And so we'll talk about that in a moment as well. And so we'll focus on these elections first. So it will be February the 20th that we have a Gemini ascendant and Mercury top of the sky here. And so this will be going on for a little while. This travels until about March the 16th. And so let's take a look at it. Mercury, this is a new moon in Pisces that day as well. And so Mercury is in Aquarius, which is very smart, electronic, super genius. And so it's ruling the chart here. Saturn's also out of shadow, Pluto's out of shadow, Pluto in areas of the sky it hasn't been in for 240 odd years in Capricorn and going into Aquarius imminently at this stage. Venus here in Aries and Jupiter also in new territory in a conjunction with Chiron. And Uranus is stationed direct actually 28 days before this, the same day as the new moon in Aquarius. Anyway, so Mars still working through its shadow here. And it's actually in trine to Mercury and the midheaven. But Mercury will keep pushing forward, moving fairly fast. And it's going to spend all of these days with the rising sign of Gemini moving through Aquarius. And we'll keep with the rising sign of Gemini and Mercury with the midheaven. Look at that one. It's got midheaven, Saturn, Mercury, 29 degrees. But I want to choose this day. Literally, like, take it easy that day. Take your stress off. March the 2nd. And so that's funny. And so we can find that when Mercury makes ingress into Pisces, the midheaven travels with Mercury and it's still a Gemini ascendant. So Mercury is still there in pride of place, top of the sky, but it's actually underneath the beams of the sun. And that takes place around here, the 4th of March. And so Mercury goes into its own underworld, as it does, 6 times a year. And we actually have this Mercury still traveling with the midheaven, with a Gemini ascendant. If I just shift the time a bit. And so that still goes on until about March the 16th. And then we actually find that Mercury has an inferior conjunction, which is Mercury in the heart of the sun, moving ahead of the sun. And that's on March the 16th. And I've kept that because the midheaven is still within 4 degrees of it. If we move it just a couple of minutes earlier and put it to 28 degrees, we'll keep this in. See, it's at 18 degrees is the midheaven. And it sextiles Uranus. And yet Mercury is in its interior conjunction at 25 degrees of Pisces. And so the reason I kept it in, because it's really wide, and we've been doing quite tight orbs of these, is because it's actually with Neptune and the Sun, interior conjunction, triple conjunction here going on, and square Mars, the day of its coming out of shadow in Mercury's sign. Mars is also in a conjunction with the ascendant. So this is a really impactful day. Not only that, Venus squares Pluto, and it's just a few days before Pluto leaves Capricorn. And we're closing out that Piscean lunar cycle, about to have 2 new moons in Aries, the first of which is 0 degrees, the second one's like 29 degrees, and that second one is a new moon solar eclipse. So that's very powerful. And so this is a very good election. Our next election we're going to look at is actually with the sun, and it's a few days later, if you will. So let's just look, because we need to get a Leo ascendant. So I'll show you how this works. Let's go forward for this day. The sun is still in Pisces here. This is not what we're looking for, but it's part of the presentation I'm sharing with you. So we've got 9 degrees of ascendant of Leo here, the midheavens in Taurus. So what we want to do is push that forward an hour or so, back an hour. We can't really get too much earlier. So this is do it a bit by minute, so you can see. So when it goes to 0 degrees of Leo, the midheaven is in Aries with Jupiter, but the sun's back in Pisces. We want the sun to be with the midheaven. And so let's go forward a few days, or maybe even a week. Go forward a week, we're into the Aries lunar cycle. The moon is exalted in Taurus here. The sun's exalted in Aries here. That's why we're choosing it, because the sun's in its favorite sign. That's glorious. Venus does have a spell in Pisces, but it's not actually with a Taurus ascendant. So although we do get an exalted Venus, it's not with a Taurus ascendant, so it's not ruling the chart, so I don't elect it. Still really nice. There's other charts, but I'm just choosing him with the ascendant ruler for this demonstration. And so we're going to go and see if we can capture that sun by the midheaven here while we're getting the Leo ascendant. And so what we're going to do is move it forward maybe another week. And we can see it's actually going to be around here. We've got the sun of the midheaven, but it's a Cancer ascendant. And so what we've got to do is push it back a little bit more and see that if we can get this perfection, it's going to be more around April the 12th where we get the best ones, because it's going to be the sun Jupiter, basically. Just move it forward a bit more. And there we go. I move this by the minute. I appreciate your patience. Here we go. So we've got this midheaven creep into Aries here, and the sun is with Jupiter. So April the 10th, but I would say that the next one's going to be even better. But you want to be, it's only close though. It's only for a few minutes. You've got to be real shrewd and look for this. I mean, if you want a personal consultation, I'll tell you exactly when this is happening. But you want to look on your local area time if you're able to do that yourself. When you want to get that midheaven at 28 degrees, and this Leo ascendant is only there at 2 degrees. So if we actually go back a bit earlier, when it's a Cancer ascendant, just a few minutes earlier, 5-10 minutes earlier, although the midheaven's still by Jupiter and the sun, it's ruling the moon. The moon's over here in Capricorn. You can't see the moon. And so we've got to wait till you get this Leo ascendant, and then boom, you can. It's about a 5-degree orb, Jupiter in the sun. The next day is probably even, like these 2 days are the best for it, even though you will get one in a few days' time with the absolute Sun Leo conjunction. And so let's show that one off, because this goes for a few days, but those are best when they're next to Jupiter. You've got about a week of it, just before we get to the sun making ingress into Taurus. And then you'll still have the sun traveling with the midheaven through Taurus, but it's just not in its exaltation. Look at these days. These are really good. April 15th, you know, exalted sun in Aries with Jupiter. And then it goes into Taurus. It's still nice to have the sun traveling with the midheaven. And we've just had an eclipse. This is in the eclipse season. And so this is, you know, really moving on. Jupiter's also going to go into Taurus in the not too distant future, but Pluto will station retrograde around here, and that sun traveling with the midheaven, Mercury retrograde as well in Taurus, as we had mentioned. And so also you can see that the nodes are culminating there. There's only a few more months there of the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio. And so we'll see that that sun, king of the sky, Helios, has its final days around May 16th, I would say, with regards to worthy elections. So that's it for the sun. Now, the next one will be in May, and here we are. We have Venus, and it's, if we go back a few days, as soon as Venus makes ingress into Cancer, if we change the time, Here we go. And change it to a Libra ascendant. So we've got to move this, and we find that actually we got this Libra ascendant from this day, about May the 7th, with the midheaven right by Venus. And this travels all the way through until about June the 3rd. And so we can watch Venus travel with the midheaven, with a Libra ascendant, Venus top of the sky through Cancer. So obviously this is about family, this is about emotions, this is our perspective on opening up and expressing our value of our emotions. Venus is also traveling with Mars finally. They don't close out their cycle until actually the spring when they get into Aquarius, because as I say, Venus is actually going to slow down and go retrograde. And so this is the last good date of Venus at 28 degrees, almost opposite Pluto. Mars already made an opposition to Pluto, which is retrograde. Venus will go off into Leo and do that. But it's not with the midheaven so much now. So there you go. And now, actually, believe it or not, this is the last of these elections. Mars is the next one. And so when Mars makes ingress into Leo, which takes place here on about May 20th, if we get the Scorpio ascendant, because Mars rules Scorpio, you see this? It's a nice pattern. It's quite fun, actually. I really enjoy doing this type of astrology. And so we've changed this a few more minutes, and we get that midheaven, get out of Cancer. Woo, woo, there it is. It's right next to Mars. And so May 20th, this will start because the Scorpio ascendant right by the south. Now, we're releasing old identifications about our own work, our own body, 10th house, our own contributions, our own creativity. You know, this is the last day of the the Taurus season, and we're actually within a Taurus lunar cycle. Just coming off the back of a full moon and lunar eclipse in Scorpio. And so, yeah, very powerful time for us. And Mars will travel with the midheaven and have a Scorpio ascendant right through until July 7th. And if I actually change the time, you can find that that takes place. See, we get the midheaven at 10 degrees, Scorpio ascendant, but then it kind of slips off. Unless June, so we've got a whole month yet, because Mars is in Leo for 5 weeks. So we can even find that if we push this back to get 28 degrees of Scorpio ascendant with Mars at the degree that Venus will station retrograde, move that midheaven back a little bit, it's an out of sign. Actually, we can find that I looked at it, and Mars does creep on as well. So we can get that midheaven up here in the July the 27th of the 26th degree of Scorpio ascendant. Venus is there too, but we can even squeeze an extra few days beyond this and get Mars into Virgo and still here have a Mars ruled chart in Virgo. So that's really good actually for, you might want to get a tattoo, you might not. You might want to go for surgery. You might want to create media and collaborate. These are very good days for that. But there's only a couple of days of this, because then the ascendant will shift from being Scorpio ruled to Jupiter ruled. And so that's it there. Okay. And that's beautiful. I really enjoyed sharing this information with you with regards to the elections. It's a different type of astrology, and this is very powerful for regards to planning things, releasing media, if we're working on a project, we're building a workshop, maybe we're building a business. As I say, could be getting married, could be getting a divorce. It's obviously with the moon building as well is something to look at. If the moon's building when these transits are going, it's going to maximize. If the moon's waning, it's going to deplete. So really, if you want a personal election, come along with me. Put the links in the description box. I'll be very happy to share with you and empower you to this information. Well, 2023 is going to be substantially shifting a lot for us. I believe that it's a story of a few quarters, because we start off within this Mars retrograde situation. It's still going to be within shadow until we saw, which was March the 16th. And then it's just a couple of days later that Pluto goes into Aquarius. And so this is flamboyant metamorphosis with regards to how we're connecting with one another. And this can play out in very many different areas. We remember that Uranus is in Taurus, and we've just had Uranus and the Saturn square the past couple of years. Innovation with regards to our templates, of course. We just had that Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020, and the fallout of that has allowed us to see that many of the old templates that don't serve us have got the opportunity to be reauthorized as we demonstrate maybe more organic connections to our spirit and incorporate this as we learn about what is best for us, what's allowing us greater prosperity. We're going to see that the economy is going to eventually collapse. There's going to be more likelihood to be power outages. There's going to be more likely to be resources. There's lots of laws that are passed terms with regards to rationale about how these sources get cut and segregated and divided through different belief systems and stories about what should be done and what has to be done. However, as we authorize ourselves, we demonstrate that we are sources. You and I, we're all sources, and we're all storytellers of our own resourcefulness. So as we recognize that we're the foundation of our own creation and have a spiritual recapitulation of our self-image, we change the frequency of our own pitch. We change the vibration of our own picture of how we see ourselves and one another, and this whole reality and the template of it. Unifying our consciousness, but still recognizing we've got lots of prejudice that we're healing, lots of projections, lots of old stories, and take responsibility for them so that we can reevaluate our own spiritual economy, because we are each not only the author of our own story, but the foundation of our own wealth. And so with the node shifting, with Venus having a retrograde, with Pluto going into Aquarius, with Jupiter going into Taurus after flying through Aquarius, oh my goodness gracious gosh, we've got quite a year on our hands. It's tremendously exciting. And I'm here to support you if you need any consultations with regards to these transits. You can have a 90-minute deep dive with me. Just give us an opportunity to empower you. I'm absolutely honored to provide the service. It's a joy and a privilege to empower you to your connection with astrology. Let's take a spin around the zodiac, and we'll try and keep this as astutely, absolutely pinpoint accurate as possible. You're talking to someone who's got Mars and Jupiter in Pisces, but we'll do our best, shall we? So thank you for this taxi ride through 2023. This is the zodiac through my eyes, and I'm very happy to share with you. We'll start here. When we're talking about this Cancer full moon, the moon full in Cancer, its own home sign. And this is so interesting because it's actually taking place as we have a superior conjunction of Mercury retrograde. It happens hours after, as well as both the Sun and Mercury trine Uranus. Tremendous healing as we finish the Mars retrograde. So the hours after, the moon opposes Mercury, and then Mercury makes its cazimi with the Sun in the heart of the Sun at 16 degrees. Wow, that's a really powerful full moon for us about the communication of our feelings and the value of that and how that changes everything for us in such a powerful healing way. Venus trine Mars retrograde. Mars retrograde at stationing here just a few days later. And so Mercury falls behind the Sun, and we have Mars stationed direct on the 12th. Mercury is hanging out for ages now, sextile the South Node, as we have mentioned this. And then it stations direct as we finish out the Capricorn lunar cycle with the Sun in a conjunction with Pluto, while Mercury's in this yod with the South Node, and which the South Node in Scorpio, 9 degrees. Mercury stationed direct at 8 degrees of Capricorn, which is where it was just a few weeks ago. Let's have a look at that to give you the absolute date. So it was flying through, Mercury was hurtling through. It was December the 12th. So, you know, it might be hard for us to remember that by the time that we actually have Mercury on around the middle of January. So it's like 5 weeks, and yet our feelings obviously remember things. And so we can find that actually this is a very powerful time of letting go, Maybe things weren't clear in our communications. Maybe we weren't clear with ourselves. Maybe we have the opportunity to let go of old traumas or old illusions and delusions through having greater communications. Mars in Gemini, stationed direct, Mercury stationed direct, and it's in the yod. It's very powerful. Mercury also squared Jupiter, but changing the belief systems about the bridge of communication, about our frequency. This is the original bridge, and when we're listening to ourselves, we have clear audience. Also, Venus is moving beyond this hampering conjunction with Saturn just a few days after this, and also Uranus stations direct the day of the new moon. It's a big oomph go here. Everything's coming out of shadow. Saturn comes out of shadow just after Venus makes ingress into Pisces. Mercury starts moving forward, pulling away from the South Node, pulling away from the Mars quincunx, and we find that we're going to be able to move forward through this third pass of Mercury through Capricorn in a very empowered manner with this exalted Venus in Pisces, okay? So this is a big deal. Mars is hardly budging. The next big thing of note for us is actually, yes, Saturn comes out of shadow. Yes, Pluto is out of shadow here as we move into these last days. This is a great time to elect anything to be released moving forward after January 26th, with the moon in a conjunction with Jupiter, sextile the sun, Venus coming out from that conjunction with Saturn. Anything from this time forward, I would say, is great to move forward on because the moon's waxing here and we're moving towards full moon in Leo. And the sun's in the opposite sign of Aquarius. This is about team projects, collaborations within tribe, maybe online media projects, all kinds of things. So great to move forward with the planning of them and these endeavors. Remember, the North Node is traveling with Uranus, and innovation of our value is the key here. Innovation of the template of our value is our key frequency. And so this is that for a while. Jupiter comes out of shadow here on the 14th of February, just after a quincunx to the South Node, which is still in Scorpio. And so we're really letting go of our old belief systems about how we would partner, how we would share energy with other people in collaboration of business, maybe our family, maybe people that we're in connection with in a very powerful way. And so Jupiter moves into new space by the 14th of February. And Venus is hanging out here with Neptune. Neptune is moving into new territory as well. Saturn spending its last few weeks in Aquarius. It was March 2020 when Saturn made ingress into Aquarius, and now it's about to make ingress into Pisces. So we're just actually finding the results. We're passing our Saturnian tests. We're a testament to the precedent which we set. And we can find that where we've worked hard is paying off dividends. We've set a standard for the legends which we're telling within our story that we're authorizing. That's what Saturn's all about. And we can find also that we have to organize ourselves with others where we are able to move forward on projects where we might need extra support from our trades and exchanges with each other. And the old world, the old traditions, they can be falling apart when Saturn goes into Pisces. It's a completely different energy. It's the twilight zone. It's passing the baton. And so this move forward more. And Saturn makes ingress into Pisces around this point here. It goes early March. It's the 8th, is it? 7th? Here we go. And we've got a lot of energy in Pisces within the Pisces lunar cycle. This is the same day as the Virgo full moon, which is also in harmony with Uranus. And so very powerful initiations. We also have a triple conjunction of Jupiter, Venus, and Chiron going on in the middle of Aries going at this stage within this Pisces season. And so very powerful times for ourselves. Mars still in shadow, remember? And the templates are changing. Pluto has not been this far into Capricorn. This is mad. And it will even have, as I have brought this date up before, the triple conjunction of Neptune and the Sun in Pisces. Remember, that's Neptune's home sign. And Mercury even joins this, making interior conjunction with the Sun, Cazimi, and it's still with Neptune. And they all square Mars as Mars is coming out of shadow. Mars stationed retrograde here on the 28th of October, remember? And so this is very powerful for us. And this day also, Venus is at 29 degrees of Mars's sign. the anaretic culminative degree of Aries, square in a cardinal square to what will be the moon and Pluto. Let's just move that along. See that moon joining with Pluto at the Venus leaves and makes ingress into Taurus before the moon can catch up. But there you go. That means that the Venus and the moon will square each other in the fixed signs just after the moon made its conjunction with Pluto at the culminative anaretic degree of Capricorn. But, you know, to have that square going on between Venus and Pluto the same day as we have Mercury, Neptune, the Sun, 25 degrees of Pisces, and Mars here in Gemini, square that triple conjunction. It's a right old powerful energy. We need to be very clear of our communications, and we've practiced that. We've been practicing this since August. And so anything that's been coming up for us, we might find that we're exalting ourselves and moving beyond it in some way, shape, or form. Venus will return back to the throat chakra, its home sign of Taurus, the day after Mars moves out of its shadow. And this is just a few days before Pluto makes ingress into Aries. We actually have the solstice first, the spring equinox, excuse me, or the equinox of Aries, the solar ingress. So this can be the whole zodiac year, the next 360 days upon the sun's ingress into Aries. This is obviously a very interesting chart to pay attention to. You can study that for a long time and pull a lot out of it. But it's upon this ingress with this moon still at 18 degrees of Pisces in the sextile to Uranus, lots of different shifts with regards to our timeline and the physical world can take place of our value being elusive, the people's value, money, economy, so many shifts can go on. Mercury is actually in Aries with the exalted sun, but it's underneath the beams. Jupiter and Chiron here, lots of different shifts going on. And Mars is still in Gemini at this point. And then it's just as we get into the Aries lunar cycle, because we have the new moon in Aries, the first of two, as mentioned. And 2 days later, then Pluto goes into Aquarius. But Pluto won't go to that first degree. In fact, Pluto won't even make it halfway through that 0 degrees of Aquarius because it stations retrograde once in about 5 weeks. So it's hardly there for much time. So let's keep moving with this because this is the last lunar cycle, which will be before we get to eclipse time. So it was very interesting that we had that Jupiter, Chiron, Venus conjunction before Pluto left Capricorn. There's a big shift in our economy, and the writing could be on the wall for quite some time before people start to take notice and have to take different types of actions, but that will have to take place. The last few aspects from Jupiter in Aries are all conjunctions. Firstly, a conjunction with Mercury, and that takes place, and they're both the ruling planets of the mutable, changeable signs. So that takes place here on March 27th, before we get to the full moon in Libra. And then we have a Sun-Jupiter conjunction on the 11th, 12th of April, as we mentioned. That's interesting days for elections. This is such a powerful time for us. We could be finding that lots of progress happens in light year flashes. We have transcendence going on. Pluto is also square the nodes here. The nodes, 4 degrees of Scorpio, Pluto's sign. North node, 4 degrees of Taurus, Venus's sign. Venus has gone into Gemini. Mars has gone into Cancer. This is a good time to talk about our feelings, our inner child. When Mars is back here in a grand trine with Saturn in the South Node, this can be a lot of authorizing space and doing big healing and talking about that. Mars sextile Mercury going into Taurus. Mercury will retrograde in Taurus, as we had mentioned, enters that shadow with the North Node here. So anyway, there's a lot going on. The first, just a lot going on, isn't there? So we come to actually a second new moon in Aries. And that takes place at 29 degrees of Aries. And this is the first of our eclipses in 2023. It's very powerful. It's an out of sign conjunction with Rahu, the North Node. It's at 4 degrees of Taurus. And the sun's exalted here. This is an out of sign square to Pluto. If Pluto was still at 29 degrees of Capricorn, that would be a very powerful square, just like when Venus squared it when there was at the culminative anaretic degrees of the cardinal signs. But seeing as Pluto's moved into fixed air, Aquarius, where we had the great conjunction at the end of 2020, and we also had the Venus-Mars begin the cycle that they're currently within, and still will be until we get to the spring of 2024, Big changes for our relationships are being activated within community as well as within ourselves as we take a higher plane of consciousness with regards to the depths of our psyche. And so this is really powerful for us. Jupiter 7 degrees away, less than that, 6 degrees away from this new moon solar eclipse with the North Node in Taurus and the Sun and the Moon meeting at 29 degrees of Aries in an outer sign square to Pluto. My goodness. So the hours after, the moon goes into its exaltation. For a minute, we have the moon exalted in Taurus and the sun exalted in Leo, well, for a few hours, and then the sun joins the moon exalted in Taurus. The sun goes into Taurus, squares Pluto just hours after, and Mercury stations retrograde in a conjunction with Uranus. That's a powerful initiation into a new moon. Wowee, brace yourself for that last day of Aries season. That's all I can say. All right. And so we move forward. We move forward in a very powerful way. The sun conjunct Rahu, Mercury starting to move backwards, and it will be that Pluto stations retrograde by the time we enter the 1st of May. Jupiter's still in Aries here. And so this is very powerful times. Mars trine in Neptune. It can be elusive times. This could be a time for media scandal. Brace yourself and tell your story the way you like it. Don't take any notice of anybody, including me, except for your own story that resonates with you. Eat the fruit and spit out the pips if you need to. Jupiter makes ingress into Taurus before we can have too much more. And so it's actually before we get to the Taurus new moon. And so we do have another eclipse in Scorpio here. It's a wide south node lunar eclipse here, but still with the sun conjunct Uranus, and it's a lot going on. We did miss Venus trine Pluto there, but that flies by. It's very interesting. It's all just culminative. It's all just additional. So Mercury finishes its retrograde in Taurus before we get to, it's with the new moon and Jupiter, but before we get to the new moon here, which happens really at the end of Taurus, as you can see. So I'm not going to go through all of the cycles with a fine-tooth comb as mentioned, but we're just going to look at these key to success, and that's poise for that first quarter. And then it's action time, it's going into it, it's connection time, it's showing who we are, showing who we're able to be. And then it's about making it a lifestyle 24/7. By the time Jupiter's with the North Node, the most profitable, truthful, outspoken, authentic representation of how we're able to live our lives as we get to the middle of spring, really asserting our value like never before. Jupiter square Pluto, it's like, hey, I've chosen, I am chosen. It's about choosing our wealth, choosing our health, choosing our prosperity. Mercury stations direct sextile Saturn, which is slowing down now there. And so Uranus is also in a new space it hasn't been in for 84 years, since the 1930s and 40s. It went retrograde just before it went to 19 degrees last summer. And so this is a very powerful innovation. But this, when Mars makes ingress into Leo, when we have lovely exalted Mars at the top of the sky charts, it also opposes Pluto in Aquarius. And Mars didn't get to oppose Pluto in Pluto last year because Mars stopped in Gemini and all the other personal planets kept moving through the zodiac. And so also Chiron is in new space now in Aries, Mars's other sign. Space that it hasn't been into since 16 degrees in April, when it goes out of shadow. Hasn't been there for 52 years. And so Mars opposes Pluto retrograde, and Venus will actually come along to do that also. And this is very powerful for us, this stage, about our economy, about our spiritual self-worth. Venus and Mars traveling together here, but Venus is going to slow down. Venus has posed Pluto, but then Pluto goes back into Capricorn July the 11th. Wow. This is really powerful. And so it's keeping going. We see that the sextile between Saturn and Jupiter now, this means a lot for regards to the plan of what's been going on for ourselves in this world since the Great Conjunction took place at the end of 2020. The world opened up, but yet there's also a plan for the Agenda 2130 to close and lock down the world so people were having to live a different style of life as consumers rather than creators. The shadow of Pluto in Aquarius is Leo, We're co-creators, and we're not to be dictated to, people pleased, or fashioned into do things that isn't designating our own personal authority or voice or truth or representation of our own authenticity. North Node Jupiter in Taurus, our truth, our throat chakra, our authenticity, ruled by Venus, and it's going to go retrograde in Leo. So we're looking about how we authorize our creativity in our relationships, how we authorize the love with our connection to our prosperity in our businesses, to our health, with our children, with our parents, with one another. It's all reflected like a diamond being refracted throughout all of our experiences, because that's what Venus is, Lucy in the sky of diamonds. It's been the evening star ever since December, and yet it will then be gobbled up by the beams of the sun once it stations retrograde in Leo. And so this is very intriguing. Look at the South Node finishing up in Mars' sign of Scorpio, the North Node finishing up in Venus' sign of Taurus. This is very powerful for us. It comes to a big crescendo for us. Mars leaves Leo and will oppose Saturn while Venus slows down and stations retrograde. But look, the nodes flip. For the next 18 months, the nodes will be in Libra and Aries, which means they just spent 18 months in Taurus and Scorpio. The South Node spends 18 months in each of the signs, as well as the North Node, which is opposite, and they take an 18.5-year cycle. And so we might want to look back 2024, 2004, 2005, the last time that the South Node was in Libra, the last time the North Node was in Aries. And so this is very powerful for our initiation and for letting go of old projections, how we act and how we conduct ourselves with poise as warrior spirits, as courageous lovers in action. Venus retrogrades just after the nodes go into herself. So that's funny because this North Node was in Venus' sign of Taurus, but then it's the South Node in Venus' sign of Libra, and the same dynamic for Mars. It was the South Node in Mars' sign of Scorpio, and now the North Node in Mars' sign of Aries. We've all got masculinity and femininity. We've all got Mars and Venus. We've all got Aries and Scorpio, and we've all got Taurus and Libra. And they're different frequencies. It's like internal and external. And we're learning to govern them. We're learning to govern them within our relationships, in our connection to each other. And we can refathom the depth of them. Last time Venus went retrograde in Leo was in 2015. You might want to cast your mind back to that point and even go back into 2007, I believe, last time Venus did it before then. But look, the sun will oppose Pluto in Cancer, not Leo. And that's the same day as Venus station retrograde conjuncts the fixed star Regulus at 28 degrees of the sun's sign of Leo, while in a sextile to the South Node in Venus' sign of Libra and a trine to the North Node. This is the same day that Chiron stations retrograde, almost 20 degrees of Aries. Mars, which rules the North Node, and Chiron is at 7 degrees of the sign of Media, and we're within a Cancerian lunar cycle. Emotional manipulation, I feel, could be on the cards through the media. Chiron and Venus station retrograde the same day in fire signs. It can be very reactive unless we take responsibility. We can take responsibility for how we respond to anything. Saturn to station retrograde as well, very recently, quite a little while before, actually. Yeah, it was a good while before, but while Venus was still in Leo, Venus actually enters its shadow at 12 degrees of Leo, just as Saturn's stationing retrograde. So Venus returns back to 12 degrees of Leo. Let's just have a look at this in refined detail. So we'll move into the Leo season and Venus will get gobbled up by the beams of the sun. 40 days and 40 nights, Venus will be retrograde. It has a conjunction with the sun in the heart of the underworld at 20 degrees of Leo. And that's in a trine to the Chiron retrograde. Isn't that a funny nuance of our story? Much healing is taking place for us all. Much, much healing. So much healing. Mercury in Virgo, you know it's going to go retrograde there as well. The sun goes into Virgo to join Mercury and Mars. Mars will be off into Libra. Venus is signed soon, but Venus is almost done with its retrograde at this point. Stations direct, as I said, here at, what is it, 12 degrees of Leo, and that's taking place as we enter September. And so we're still within a Leo lunar cycle. Also, Jupiter stations retrograde as Venus stations direct. Poetry, isn't it? They're kind of in a square to each other in fixed signs. This will take place for a third time, this square. Here you go. And so that as we go forward with Venus and Jupiter stations retrograde, we have a fixed square going on there, 16th of September, as we enter that Virgo media ruled harvest lunar cycle, halfway through the zodiac year, September, boom. And so very powerful it is indeed. And so we also recognize we're closing out a Mars Sun synodic cycle at this point, which started way back in 2021. That's not going to culminate for a while yet, but that's something to keep an eye on. Venus moving through its third pass of Leo, this retrograde, very karmic for our relationships, very much so, whether it's business, whether it's health, or whether it's romance. It could be something to play with, something to experiment with, something to be creative with, something to open to the joy of. All kinds of great things could be taking place. Look at Uranus, now retrograde. When did that take place? We're just trying to squeeze as much information as we can in here. So Uranus goes up to 23 degrees, stations retrograde before Venus stations direct, before Jupiter stations retrograde. That's the 28th of August. Just wanted to get that date in there for you. But this is really interesting. This is the bit I really want to pay attention to. Venus coming out of shadow, but before it does, makes harmony with the nodes here. So the South Node in Venus's sign of Libra, and it's like this is a very powerful bit of healing. Just like when Mars culminates on the 16th of March, by October, Venus is culminating its retrograde and has a crescendo by making sextile to Mars and the South Node. Mars goes over the South Node. We take away the value of an old identification. Oh, that's the whole point of the whole retrograde. We're able to let go of maybe thinking that the government's going to protect us, or maybe thinking that we idealize over certain lovers, or maybe that we can't, or we're not able, or that we're inept, or that we're victim to something. That old idea, it goes at this point. It's released at that point. And remember, this is very powerful. It's coming off the back of a full moon in Aries as well, Mars's sign. We're really letting go within the Virgo medius lunar cycle of old emotions trapped in the body. We're healing in a very powerful way. Venus goes into Virgo. Venus also was trying the North Node, remember? Mars opposed that North Node, its own node transit. Mars goes into home sign of Scorpio, where it will be for 5 weeks. And yet it's still sextile Venus. The lovers will close out their cycle, but they're having this, again, opening sextile. This is so good for our relationships as we put our divisions aside, as we put our rifts into conscious healing, as we dissolve the gap within ourselves. This is tremendously healing for us. Tremendously so. Okay. Pluto also just stationed direct after its retrograde upon the ingress of Venus into Libra at 27 degrees. So we can pay attention, because actually as we start the year out, Pluto is at 27 degrees moving out of shadow. It returns back to that point after going to 0 degrees of Aquarius. So Pluto stations direct on the 11th of October, just as Mars goes into Pluto's sign of Scorpio. That's also Mars's home sign. Venus and Mars travel together for a little bit. That sextile closes out through October. And yeah, we keep on going. Saturn's due to station direct here at 0 degrees of Pisces, takes place on the 4th of November. And so we're just finishing up this year. Wow, isn't it mad? And Pluto is going through that 28th degree of Capricorn, where we start the year out. Very intriguing, into that Scorpionic lunar cycle. We have eclipses, don't we? More eclipses in these signs. And that's that big thing that we're talking about with regards to the Libra season. that Libra lunar cycle is really clearing up a lot for us. But the full moon will be an out of sign eclipse in Taurus. So that's interesting, isn't it? It's conjunct Jupiter, which is wide, and the North Node in Aries, which is wide. Just letting you know about that. Pay attention to that. Also, you want to pay attention to that Mercury doing its retrograde in Aries. We didn't really focus on that, but we see that it goes all the way back to earlier degrees, 8 degrees. It's the same in each of the signs. So it's 8 degrees for Mercury, finishing around the middle of January, and then again April and May, and then again August and September in the Earth signs. Okay, now we're finishing things up, tying things in a bow here. As we mentioned, Saturn stations direct at 0 degrees of Pisces as we move through November. And it will be that we find that Jupiter's about to station direct as well as we go into December in Taurus. I feel like it's that coming on. You know, Mercury's retrograde back in Capricorn. This time it'll go back into Sagittarius. No, Jupiter finishes out the year retrograde, is it? Let's just have a look. I'm just journeying with you guys here. Yep, Jupiter stations on New Year's Eve at 5 degrees of Taurus. And we have that lovely trine from the sun while Jupiter's retrograde in Capricorn over the holidays next year. Interesting stuff, isn't it? We actually have a solstice cazimi as the sun and Mercury will swap signs here as we go over the solstice. That's a really interesting cazimi to have at 0 degrees of Capricorn and a trine to the Jupiter retrograde and an exalted moon in Taurus going on there. Venus, we finish out the year with Venus coming into Sagittarius. Yes, just about. So there you go. There's a lot of shifts going on, a lot of innovation going on. And it will be by January that we have Pluto go back into Aquarius. And so that was my run through with you. And it was a sprint, wasn't it? Because there's so much to talk about. And all of the fine astrologers out there have all done great explanations. And so I'm really into Venus retrograde in Leo. I'm really into the nodal shift. I'm really into Mars finishing its retrograde. And that Mars opposed Pluto retrograde as well. There's a lot going to be going on with our economy. There's so much of us self-organizing ourselves within tribe, not just online, but in person, connecting together, reorganizing how we do family. Family is nothing but opening up to our circle, opening up to our emotions, opening up to transparent, authentic connection. This is about our heart, showing our hearts, being creative with our love, and showing that we're able to let go of old prejudice, old judgments, old divisions, and expand and broaden our consciousness. This is incredibly powerful. 2023 will have its challenges. But as we recognize ourselves and play together with all of the energies that we have available to us, we can really find that we step into a tremendous level of empowerment as one, together, unified, as tribe, connected at our core. If you want a personal consultation, follow the links in the description box below. I'd love to connect with you. Other than that, absolutely all the best for you throughout 2023. You're so dearly appreciated. My name's Philip Daniel Miles. Cheerio for now.